Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on VFR flying in Canada. My name is Adrian Tegler, and I'm a member of ForeFlight's Pilot Support Team. I'm also a Canadian pilot, and I've had the opportunity to fly commercially both overseas as well as for an airline here in Canada. Before we begin, you can ask questions via the GoToWebinar message panel, and we'll respond to some of those questions during the presentation and many others during the Q&A at the end. If you have any audio problems, we recommend joining from a computer and not from a mobile device. The session is being recorded and will be accessible at foreflight.com/webinars. All right, today's topics. We're going to do a new feature highlight, a review of visual flight rules in Canada, a VFR trip flow, VFR filing in Canada, tips and tricks, and end with some Q&A. Before we jump into the webinar, I just want to cover some of the features that are available in the higher subscription plans. We get a lot of questions during webinars like, is this feature available in my subscription? What subscription do I need to purchase to have this feature? So let's kind of do a broad overview and look at some of the features that are available in the higher subscription level. So first of all, we have Pro Plus and above, and that's going to add safety enhancing terrain and situational awareness features that we'll take a look at more in a minute. Advanced weather forecast layers and some must-have features for IFR flying. So great for both VFR and IFR flying. The next level is performance plans, and that's going to provide even more advanced forecast visualizations. All the 3D features, which are great for VFR flying and familiarization. So that's the 3D airport and route familiarization, integrated weight and balance planning, and the takeoff and landing distances. So features that are in Pro plans and above, they include synthetic vision, the hazard advisor features, georeference plates and airport diagrams that allow you to place the procedure, the approach directly on the map for better situational awareness. The profile view with airspace and terrain, really valuable feature to have that profile view. We'll look at it in our flight example today. And then moving up to the performance plans, it's going to give you features like this dynamic winds on the map, the 3D airports and routes. That includes forecast weather in 3D and in the profile view, so you can actually take a look at your planned route in 3D and then overlay things like icing or turbulence or clouds in 3D. Performance profiles. So ForeFlight's pre-configured performance profiles are included with all the performance plans. They're in-depth, accurate profiles based on manufacturer data that are built, and they load up in seconds for the aircraft type that you select. All right, so that's a quick overview of some of the features that are available in Pro Plus and in Performance Plus, and you'll see those features kind of as we go through the presentation today. You can also see a full breakdown of what features are available in each subscription level. If you go to the foreflight.com and go to the buy page, it'll list the different subscriptions, and if you scroll down, it has a full chart of the features that are associated with each subscription level, so you can reference that as well. All right, let's jump into some of the new features that have come to ForeFlight recently and since our last Canadian flying webinar. Graphical NOTAMs now have come to the map. So here we can see the maps page in ForeFlight with the NOTAMs layer selected, and it's showing a whole bunch of NOTAMs here in Alberta for the fires that are happening right now. So it is a great way to see where those NOTAMs are, and if your route was to go through there, obviously you'll be aware that there's something that you need to check out there. So that graphical no Tams layer is handy to have on the map. Per leg altitude in the profile view. So you can now view any altitudes that you've set for your route. So here's an example of a route that we're going to talk about more today, but there's a couple of waypoints there that I've added altitudes to, kind of a step climb scenario that we have going on. So 3,500 at Constitution, that waypoint. And then I've got a glacier waypoint for 8,500 feet. And the profile view now will reflect those steps and those waypoint specific altitudes that you set for your route. Profile corridor. So your route now includes this visualization of the corridor that's being looked at in terms of terrain or obstacles along your route. And so here we can see our route kind of runs along close to the water, as well as close to kind of a mountain range. So right now I've got a 2 nautical mile corridor, which is 1 nautical mile on either side of the route selected. And you can see the profile view reflecting the terrain within that corridor, and it gives you a better sense of what is being looked at in this case. So you can see that there's some terrain close to the route in the one area, and it's showing that in the vicinity of your route. I find this feature is also helpful because sometimes you don't realize that you may have a corridor selected that's quite large and may not even be applicable for what you need. So here's another example with the same route. And I've got now, this was an 8 nautical mile. So 4 nautical miles on either side of the route corridor. And you may have something like this selected and not really realize it. But now with the profile corridor, you can see the area that ForeFlight is looking at when it's showing these terrain and obstacle hazards in the profile view. So if you looked at this profile view, you may think that, well, that's, I know my route isn't going to be going over any mountains, but it's going close enough to the mountains in this case. And you have such a large profile corridor selected that ForeFlight's looking that far on either side of the route and just showing you what's there. So it's better awareness of what hazards and where exactly along your route ForeFlight is looking. So in this case, I would change it back to be a more narrow corridor, which is more applicable because I don't think I will be flying 4 nautical miles on either side of that route. In this case, I'll be staying pretty close to the route, and I don't need such a wide corridor. Another new feature is our airport runway length filter. So you can now tap on the map settings, the gear button, and scroll down and select the minimum runway length. So if you had an aircraft that has a longer landing roll than some, you can select a minimum, say 3,000 feet, and ForeFlight's only going to show the airports that have a runway that has 3,000 feet or greater runway length. So in this case, we're looking at Courtenay and Comox. There's an airport in Courtenay that has, I think, an 1,800 foot runway. So that's not shown, whereas Comox is shown because it has a longer runway. So ForeFlight will actually hide those airports that are not applicable based on the selection that you make. VFR checkpoints. So you can see now I turned off the runway filtering. So now you can see the Courtenay Air Park is visible as well as the Comox Airport. And you can see that there's also those VFR checkpoints, which is another new feature that we have those, and nice to see those in Canada. Here's another example in the Toronto area. A lot of those VFR checkpoints, those little green flags nicely highlighted there on the aeronautical map in ForeFlight. Another feature we have is the controlled airspace alerts. This is great for extra awareness when you're flying. So this is going to pop up an alert like this example. The Comox airspace there, the controlled airspace around the airport. It's going to give you a warning as you approach it. And in this case, we're just about a nautical mile away, and it's telling you that it's from surface to 6,000. And then as you enter it, it's going to tell you that as well, and it will tell you as you exit. So it's nice, and that's both visual and audio alerts for that. And you can also adjust those settings with how long before and how far before you want those alerts to appear, and those are in the ForeFlight settings. You can also access those settings on the maps page via the map settings gear button. So here you can see you can turn it on and off. You can select altitude buffers, airspace alert range. Do you want it to alert you 5 minutes before, 2 minutes before, 10 minutes before? You can select that, and then the different types. You can even specify what types of airspace you want alerts for. All right, so those are some new features. Let's jump into some VFR review. So first, I always recommend pre-flighting your device. So that includes checking your software, make sure ForeFlight and iOS are up to date. You can check what version of ForeFlight you have in ForeFlight by tapping More and then About. And at the top of the page, it'll say the version. So you can also just open the App Store where you would update your apps. You tap on your profile. I like to swipe down in that App Store view to refresh the list of apps that needs to be updated. And if there is an update for ForeFlight, it will pop up there and you can just update to the latest version. You want to check your battery, of course. Make sure you've got a good charge before the flight. So charge your devices, and then you may want to have a backup battery, like a USB battery pack or something, depending on how long your flight is. Current charts and data. So you want to make sure you have the latest charts. Nice thing with ForeFlight is that they're always available. So it's just up to us as pilots to make sure that we have the latest information downloaded. So the CFS and the latest charts. So you can go do that on the More downloads page in ForeFlight. You can also use the pack feature, and we'll look at that a bit more when we go through today's example flight. And the pack feature just is a great second kind of redundant check and make sure that you have all the charts and data that's applicable to the route that you have planned. So, all right. So what do we need to know before we fly? And what do we need to have? So charts, we just talked about that. Weather, we want to make sure we have reviewed the weather. No Tams, everybody's favorite thing, right? To review no Tams, but so important. Always check no Tams. You need to know the class of airspace that you may be flying in for the flight. Pilot and aircraft documentation. Of course, you need to have all your documentation carried with you. Aircraft equipment and aerodrome information. So make sure that you have all the information that's relevant to your flight. So pilot documentation, you're going to need things like your pilot license, valid medical certificate, proof of citizenship, passport, birth certificate, photo ID. Note, for U.S. recreational and sport, pilot certificates are not recognized in Canada. If your license or certificate meets the ICAO standards, it is valid for operating aircraft between the US and Canada. So visual flight rules, VFR charts. We have our VTA charts, right? Our terminal area charts, which is a closer view of areas like Vancouver or Toronto or Calgary that are these busier terminal areas. So those VTA charts are very useful in those areas. We have our VFR navigation charts, our VNC charts, and those are kind of a broader scale, similar to the US sectional and aeronautical charts. Those are available, of course, across Canada. The Canada Flight Supplement, the CFS, right? And that's our publication on Canadian North American aerodromes, has all the information for airports and their procedures and information that we need. There's also the Canada Water Aerodrome Supplement, which is great for anybody flying on floats, has the information on water aerodromes, and that's available in ForeFlight via the documents page. Canadian airspace. So Canadian domestic airspace is divided into 7 classes. Two-way radio communication is required when operating in Class A, B, C, or D. Okay, so keep that one in mind for Class E airspace during IFR flight. So Class A, controlled high-level airspace, IFR only. That's not really applicable to our VFR flying webinar today, but it's good to sort of remember. Class B, controlled low-level airspace above 12,500 feet, ASL up to 18,000 feet, IFR and controlled VFR only. Class C, so that's controlled airspace, IFR and VFR both. ATC, air traffic control, is going to provide separation for IFR and VFR flights when necessary. So that's if we're flying VFR, we may ask for flight following and get permission to enter into Class C controlled area. Class D, controlled airspace, also IFR, VFR allowed. ATC will provide separation for IFR aircraft only. Class E, controlled airspace, IFR and VFR permitted. ATC will provide separation for IFR aircraft only. Very similar to Class D. Class F, special use airspace, and it may be controlled or uncontrolled, and it may be a restricted or an advisory area. And you see that information on the VNC chart. And Class G is uncontrolled. So here's a nice graphic just showing those different airspace types. So you can see the different control zones. So Class C, terminal control area for busy airports. D, control zone and terminal control area for moderate traffic airports. And E, control zone for airports without towers. We've got the G, uncontrolled airspace there. And then the B and A, the controlled airspace above that. Just a good graphical representation there with the different control zones. All right, VFR weather minima. So let's cover this a little bit. So there's different weather minima for the different airspace that you may be flying in. So for a control zone, the minimum flight visibility is not less than 3 miles. Just for in standard conditions here, we're not talking getting special VFR. So the standard visibility for a control zone, not less than 3 miles of visibility, horizontally 1 mile from cloud, vertically 500 feet. Other controlled airspace, not less than 3 miles. Same, horizontally 1 mile, vertically 500 feet from cloud must be maintained. So now if you get into uncontrolled airspace, it differs slightly if you're 1,000 feet AGL or above. So if you're above 1,000 feet, versus below 1,000 feet. So most of the time you'll probably be above 1,000 feet, and that minimum visibility is 1 mile during the day, and then 3 miles at night is what you need. Horizontally, you need to be 2,000 feet away from clouds, and vertically 500 feet away from clouds. For operating 1,000 feet AGL and below for fixed wing, you want to have, or you need to have, not less than or above 2 miles visibility during the day, and you need to have at least 3 miles at night. It's just clear of cloud for distance. The weather layer color coding in ForeFlight is helpful for determining the category of the weather. So we've got a nice green dot for VFR, right? And that's indicating that the ceilings are greater than 3,000 feet and the visibility is greater than 5 miles. This also includes sky clear. So you got moderate VFR is a blue dot. So those will be ceilings from 1,000 to 3,000 feet AGL, right? And or visibility 3 to 5 miles. A red dot is IFR. And that's going to be ceilings at 500 to less than 1,000 feet. So 1,500 feet and or visibility 1 mile or less. And then we've got our low IFR, which is magenta, ceiling of less than 500 feet and or visibility less than 1 mile. So you can overlay the flight category on the map. That's a layer that you can select on the maps page. It shows the different dots for the airports that are reporting it. It comes from the METAR information. If there's a question mark, that means unknown. So that may be that the METAR doesn't include that information. Some METARs don't have all the information needed to populate the flight category. And here's an example of the flight category overlay in the Vancouver area. Looks like a beautiful day. We've got mostly VFR conditions across the board. Bellingham maybe is the exception. And you can tap on any of the dots, and that'll bring up the map sidebar with more information, so you can dig into the METAR and just confirm the conditions there. 30 statute miles visibility. And good way to see a broad view of the weather in all the stations in the areas that you may be flying. So documents. Within ForeFlight, you can select the documents page, and you can tap on drives in Nav Canada, and that will open up the Nav Canada documents catalog with important documents like the aeronautical information manual, the AIM, the CFS, the CapGen, if you were needing it for IFR, all these Nav Canada documents that are useful to have. So make sure to reference those and have them downloaded on your device, the ones that you need. There's also great legends for VFR charts, like so VNC chart legend or VTA chart legend. Another thing on the documents page that's worth noting is under documents, ForeFlight, there's the pilot's guide to ForeFlight mobile. This is just a great resource for everything ForeFlight. So if you want to kind of look a little bit deeper into how something works or how you do something, you can bring this guide up on your iPad, or you can bring it up on the computer. There's a table of contents. You can search the guide on your iPad and find more information on all the different features and how they work. Okay, let's get into our flight today. So CYBL to CYAZ, that's Campbell River to Tofino. A beautiful flight on Vancouver Island. So I'm going to start by planning this flight with my departure out of Campbell River. My destination, of course, Tofino on the other side of the island, and take a look at that with the VNC chart. Next, I'm going to make sure my aircraft's selected. I'm going to open up the performance profile, select that. So 2400 RPM for today. I'm going to set an altitude initially. Let's go with 6,500. We'll take a look at that in the profile view. I'm going to set my departure time. All the information is used based on that for my winds. I'm going to go to profile, and it looks like a bit of a conflict with 6,500 feet on the descent and in the climb and cruise. So I'm going to go back and change that to 8,500. And go back to profile view and just take a look. It looks like my cruise now is correct, but there's still an issue with the climb and the descent portions of the flight. And it's just a 172 after all, so it's not going to climb like a rocket ship. So let's go to the airports page here, and I'm just going to review a couple of things. So weather, I'm going to see what runway I may be departing from out of Campbell River. Looks like I may be departing to the north. Well, the winds are fairly light. So I'm going to now rubber band my route to make a little bit more realistic departure, give myself more miles, which is what I'm actually going to fly. And it'll help the climb and it'll display the profile a little bit more accurately to what I'm actually going to fly. I'm actually going to take a look as well here, because I kind of want to fly down the coast over Courtney just to get a nice view of the coastline there. So I'm going to look at, go into airports page here, procedure other, which is where I'm going to find the terminal procedure chart. And in this chart, there's Campbell River there, and it shows there's this highway route here. I'm going to follow this highway route and then go over Comox Lake, and then I'm going to go up over the glacier, which is a nicer flight. So I'm going to now actually select, I've got a custom overlay that I created. So custom content, it shows this highway route. So again, just showing you things that you can do. You can create your own routes with ForeFlight's custom content features. So I'm going to now rubber band my route along this highway route, and I'll use the first waypoint constitution there, which was listed in the terminal procedure chart. And I'm going to come down here to near Courtney. And that's also going to help because it'll give me time to climb before I cross the mountains that are kind of in the middle of the island. I'm going to also rubber band my route to a waypoint I made called Glacier, which I know is right over the glacier, the Comox Glacier, because this will be a beautiful route to fly right over the glacier on the way to Tofino. So you can see my climb in the profile view now is perfect. I have enough miles along the shore before to climb up and cruise well above the terrain and the mountains in the middle. So it looked like still an issue with the descent portion. So I'm going to go and take a look at the airport information for Tofino. And I see there's some VFR waypoints here. So I'm probably going to descend and go maybe via these waypoints here to land into Tofino. So looking at the CFS here is useful for that information. So I'm now going to rubber band my route to these waypoints to make a more realistic descent profile for my route. And that's going to reflect in the profile view with my route clearing terrain. It should, with my route clearing the terrain on the descent now, because we kind of fixed the climb. And now we're kind of making our route more accurate for the descent portion, which should show up a little bit better in the profile view. So we can take a look at that. There we go. So I don't see any conflicts with terrain now. We're well above of that, just about 1,000 feet over the glacier, which is perfect. So that'll work, 8,500. And our climb and descent routing is now a little bit more accurate, which is with what we'll fly. I want to take a look at the glacier, how that's going to actually look flying over. So I'm going to zoom in a bit on the map, and we'll take a look at that in 3D. So if I actually if you tap hold on the map anywhere, with performance subscription, you've got a 3D button. So I'm going to tap on that, and then that's going to show me what it's actually going to look like in that point that I tap. So here's a like a 3D view, a satellite view of the glacier. Looks like it's in the summer, because usually this glacier has more snow. I've flown over it many times. Anyway, it looks absolutely epic. And that's kind of going to be where I'm going to fly right over. So I can see that. Looking back towards the coast on the east side. Looks like there's some traffic displayed in the 3D view. Okay, so that gives me a little sense of what I'm going to expect flying over the glacier. And I'm just going to zoom out here again and take a look at my route with it, which I'm fairly happy with now, how that route is looking. I can also preview the whole route in 3D. So if I click that button there in the FPL menu, the 3D button, and then I can just kind of quickly fly it in 3D just to kind of take a look. That's my departure to the north. I'm probably not going to fly it that far north, but that's fine. And then my flight initially is going to go along the coast by Courtenay. So I can take a look. It's good to see, there's the Comox Airport and the Courtenay Air Park, and what my landing options might be if I needed something, if there was an emergency. Continuing on, flying over Comox Lake, that is going to be perfect to fly over the lake like that. And then that lines me up with flying directly over the glacier. So I get a good sense of how that flight path is going to work. And then continuing on west, crossing the island, kind of looking at what my engine out options might be around there. And there's some valleys and lakes. And then my descent into Tofino here via those waypoints that I put in that were listed on the VFR terminal procedure chart for Tofino. And just the CFS page for Tofino as well that I was referencing. So I can kind of see how, I'm going to come right in along the beach there. That's Long Beach. That's going to be absolutely beautiful approach into Tofino. And get a sense of how that's going to look. So just amazing for situational awareness. If it's somewhere that I haven't been, or somewhere I haven't been for a while, it's so great to kind of preview that route in 3D, and just see what I'm going to expect and how that's going to work. All right. So I'm going to now take a little bit more look at my destination airport, Long Beach, Tofino. Take a look at the runways here, the METARs. I can see it looks like we've got, runway 16, 6 knots headwind there, a little bit of crosswind, nothing much. And see that's probably going to be my expected runway, but just to get a sense of what that might be. Of course, I'll review the CFS page for Tofino. So you can access that both on the documents page or just via the airports page. There's the direct link under info tab, CFS. It's going to open the CFS page for Tofino. And then the Tofino Long Beach VFR terminal procedure chart. You can quickly access that by opening the airports page for Tofino. And then under the procedures other tab, it'll open up the VFR terminal procedure chart. And again, I can see there's a noise sensitive area there. You can see the control zone E, 5 nautical miles to 3,100, that I'll have to be aware of. And I'm going to familiarize myself with that. I'll take a look at the aerodrome chart for Tofino. So you can view that as the Nav Canada chart like this. You can also open the maps page, and as long as you have the aeronautical map selected. So in this case, I've got the aeronautical map and the aerial map selected, but as long as you have the aeronautical map selected, which is ForeFlight's data-driven aeronautical map, and you zoom in on the airport, it's going to bring up the airport diagram, which is great for kind of seeing how my route kind of comes in, and just take a look at the airport diagram right on the map that way. All right, let's jump into some more weather. So I'm going to start by overlaying some weather on the map. So I can view it with my route. So you can select a radar. There's not too much on the radar today. I also like to check out other things like the color infrared satellite is pretty neat. Again, pretty clear. It's a good VFR day today. I'm going to go down and select, see if there's any turbulence. And so you select the turbulence altitude that it's going to look at. So 3,000 feet, I'm not seeing anything. So no forecasted turbulence for this area, really. Winds were pretty calm, so that's, I guess that makes sense. 10,000 feet. I've now got the cloud layer on there, and I'm just playing the slider through. So it's forecasted clouds. And it was looking ahead. It was seeing a tiny bit, but that was, I think, outside of the range of my flight time. Wind speeds. This is a great tool. I love it. Just visually shows you, so quickly. So at 8,000 feet, about my cruise altitude, it looks like I'm going to have tailwind on the way over to Tofino. You can see that quite close. And as I zoom in on the airport, I'll bring that slider down for wind speed down to the surface. And then I can see where the winds are coming from the north there. And kind of get a sense of what runways I'd be expecting. Runways 29, something like that. So that's going to show the winds, speed and direction there. I'm going to click the NOTAMs layer that we talked about earlier and just zoom out to see if there's any graphical NOTAMs along the route. You can see there's some farther away, but nothing that's showing up close to my route. Flight category. Again, you can see those green VFR dots for the airports in the area. Visibility is nice too. So the visibility overlay, so 15 miles. There it is shown in the METAR. If you click on that visibility icon, it's going to show it. 30 miles at Campbell River. All right, so moving on, I'm going to check the GFAs. So here we go. Looking at the Pacific region currently, seeing a lot of H's. That's good. And again, just kind of confirming the things that I've already been checking. It looks like sky clear plus 6 miles around the Vancouver Island there. This is icing, turbulence, and freezing level. Again, clear. So it's just a redundant check. Obviously, it's great to check these GFAs as well and just reconfirm the information that I already was looking at on the turbulence layer and looking at the clouds and the flight category layer. So this is just backing that up. All right, pack. So now that I've checked my weather and I've got my route set up, I want to use the pack feature here to ensure that I have all the information downloaded for my route. So I'm ready to go flying. So you can see the little pack button, the suitcase there, which is in the FPL menu that I've got open. And if you tap on that, it's going to bring up this view, which is going to show the different items that I can pack. I can pack them individually if I don't want everything, or just just tap on the pack button there at the bottom right and pack all of that, which is going to save it on my device for the flight. So it'll be saved and it can be viewed when my iPad is offline during the flight. So here we go. It's all packed. The next thing is I like to send my flight from the maps page over to the flights page and then look at it there, as well as connect it with the mass imbalance or the weight imbalance, the same. So from the maps page, you can tap the send to button in the FPL menu and select flights, and that will send the flight over to flights. Here I'm going to review the flight. All the information populates. Now I have a bit more. So I've got a payload section here with performance subscription, and I can link my weight and balance profile to the flight. I'm also going to start adding in my passengers here. So I've got myself. I'm going to add a passenger. I'm going to take 3 people today. So it's full flight. I want to make sure that that's safe and within the weight and balance limitations of the little 172, 20 pounds of baggage. I won't be taking any surfboards in the 172 today. I'll have to rent those down into Fino. You can click on the summary and you can see that my takeoff weight is below the maximum takeoff weight, which is great. I also saved that to my flight files. So you saw that I clicked send to and I saved to flight files. So it's saved with the flight, and just review that information that's now populated for the flight. Now my flight fuel is all based on the weights that I've entered. And we're getting ready to go. I'm going to calculate my nav log. I'll just refresh that. So now I have a detailed nav log with all the information relating to my flight. You can print that if you'd like. And generate a briefing. Here we have the vertical cross-section chart showing my kind of route profile with, would show any turbulence on there and show the winds. Okay, significant weather. Review again, METARs and TAFs. I see a little tempo there. And then no Tams. So a good place to review your no Tams as well for the departure destination and en route. I'm actually just going to go back into the briefing there and then show that again. So you can send to, save to ForeFlight files. So that's now saving my briefing, the briefing that I just got. So it's like a snapshot of my briefing there, and it's saving it to the files that are associated with the flight. So there's the weight and balance file that I saved, and the briefing is there too. So I have 2 files associated with this flight. They're going to stay associated with that flight indefinitely now. So I have that just kind of as a backup that they're there. Then I can go proceed to file and file my flight plan. So that's going to go directly to Nav Canada, and I'm good to go. So just a couple notes on filing. So when a VFR flight plan is filed in Canada, ATC Air Traffic Control assumes that you will depart as filed. So as you have filed. So Nav Canada will activate the flight plan or flight itinerary using the estimated time of departure, the ETD, as the actual time that you depart. So they're assuming that what you've said in your filing is going to happen. So they will use that. If you decide not to fly, but you don't call Nav Canada to cancel your plan after your ETA, they will assume that you're overdue and they'll initiate search and rescue activities to locate your plane. Therefore, if you decide to cancel your flight plan after the ETD, you must contact Nav Canada via phone to cancel your flight plan. So Nav Canada will assume, again, that what you file is going to happen. And if they don't hear from you, they will initiate search and rescue if they deem that you're overdue from your arrival time. So you do need to cancel your flight plan if you decide not to fly, if you filed. So we have a great webinar specifically on filing in Canada. So I recommend taking a look at this for a real in-depth kind of look at filing in Canada. And you can find that at foreflight.com/webinars. All right, so let's get into some takeoff and landing performance in ForeFlight. So on the flights page, I have my flight here from Campbell River to Tofino, and it's in my 172. And with my performance subscription in this case, I have these takeoff and landing buttons. And so what those show, let's go into the takeoff. So I'll tap on the takeoff button, and it's going to give me an in-depth takeoff report for the runway that I select. So in this case, I selected departing on runway 30, and it's going to pull in the winds from the METAR. You can manually add them if they change, or if you'd like to add your own, if you have more current information. And it knows the usable length of the runway, the slope, the surface. So it's going to have all that information, and it's going to use your ForeFlight's detailed aircraft profile for the 172, and it's going to determine what your distance will be for takeoff based on the weight as well. So it's going to pull in all that data and give you a pretty accurate takeoff distance. So here we go, just kind of going further down on the page. So based on a takeoff weight of 2,227 pounds, and the takeoff flaps there. This is based on the POH data for the 172, and a safety distance factor I've got here of 1. You can adjust that kind of as needed. I actually like to increase that. We'll look at an example here in a minute. And it'll show my ground roll and liftoff speed, and it'll show all the information. This is just a great safety check, especially if you are taking off or landing on a shorter runway. So, and let's look at an example of that. So say I decided to land in Courtenay. So it's on the way, and maybe I wanted to pick up a friend in Courtenay for this flight to Tofino, and I wanted to land there on the way back, for example. And say the scenario was I was closer to the maximum weight for the 172, and the winds, were fairly light that day. And it's a warm day. So this shows you an example where Courtenay has a shorter runway. It's 1,800 feet long, which for a 172, that's plenty and no issue. But you start to add on factors like a heavy aircraft that's close to its maximum weight, light winds, high temperatures. Density altitude, right, is higher. So you actually can get into a scenario where, in this case, it's giving me, this is a landing, and ForeFlight is calculating the landing distance to be above what the runway has available. So it's, could be incredibly dangerous. Part of this as well, if we scroll down, I have set my safety distance factor to 1.4. So I've increased my safety distance factor because, you never know conditions. This gives me some buffer if I wasn't to touch down, right at the threshold. If I floated, something like that, if to float a little bit, it's nice to have a bit of a safety distance buffer built in. So I set it to 1.4 in this case. There's my landing weight and the altimeter, wind speed, all that information's in there. And it's determining that it may not be, or it's not, the runway length is not sufficient for this kind of scenario. So that's that could be a wake-up call for a short runway, and this could save you from a potential issue trying to land on this runway and not doing these calculations. I know when I used to fly a caravan in mountainous areas commercially, there were certain mountain runways that we would fly into, and we would bring up the POH and the performance information every single time before we went in and before we went out. Most often it was the restriction was whether we even departed for the runway or for the airport, to make sure that we could do that landing safely, and then of course do the takeoff out as well. But if we had this tool back then, this is so quick, and it just provides really crucial information. So that's a look at the takeoff and landing information that can be accessed in ForeFlight. All right, so some tips and tricks. And just good to know kind of if this, you might have seen some of these things already, but when we're looking at the VNC charts, for example, and the VTAs, it's good to know that they're kind of based on a tile system. So if you tap on the map settings button and you scroll down, there's an option called map touch action. And so there's 3 different options: no action, bring chart to front, and bring chart to front with legends. So if you have bring chart to front with legends, you can tap and it's going to bring the VNC chart that you tapped forward and show the legend of the chart as well. If you don't have if it's without legends, then it'll just bring it forward. But where this is important is in areas where you have multiple VNC charts and maybe a VTA chart as well that overlap each other. So you can just tap on the map and it'll cycle forward the chart that's beneath, and you can continue to kind of cycle whatever chart you want forward and essentially view all the information on all the charts that are available in that area. So it's a good feature to know about, is that map touch action. Legends. So again, on the documents page, I mentioned this earlier, in the Nav Canada drive, there's a folder called Legends, and you can select that and view the legends for our VFR charts, like the VNC chart legend. And it's nice to reference what does this mean again, or what's that airspace? Okay, that's that dashed line refers to Class C control zone. So it's a good reference. Flight Information Center, RCOs. There's a document for that in the Nav Canada drive as well. So that shows the different centers for Canada. And zooming in here, since our flight was from Campbell River to Tofino, you can find those informations there and frequencies. Glide Advisor. Okay, so another tip and just really valuable feature here is that I always fly with is the Glide Advisor. So here you can see this is the flight that we had planned for today, starting the climb towards the glacier from Courtenay, going across to Tofino. You can see the Glide Advisor is that green kind of ring around the airport, and it's nice. I can see it, and at this point I can probably turn around, glide back to Courtenay Airport, or at least glide back to the shoreline. Definitely there's some options to maybe land along the edge of the lake, the Comox Lake there, but there's another airport, S6 as well. So it gives me a great visual representation of where I can glide to. And it also will pull in any wind information if you have that, if you're connected to, say, an XM weather receiver like a Garmin GDL 52 or something like that, or 51. It'll pull in the winds and it will change that glide range ring based on winds, which is quite valuable. Custom content. I mentioned this earlier and just wanted to circle back to it. So you saw that when I was doing the planning, there was I made a custom map overlay which showed the VFR terminal procedure route, the highway route. And so there's a page in ForeFlight, so more custom content. And this is where you can import your own custom map overlays, your own waypoints, and just different custom content. It's very powerful. You can create these in Google Earth or in Google My Maps. They're relatively simple to create, especially in something like Google My Maps, which is, you can do that in your browser, and you can create anything from routes to, areas that you want to highlight, a practice area. You can bring in icons and shapes, and you can really the sky's the limit. So that's an example of the one I created here, the VFR terminal procedure chart overlay. And that was that overlay again. So very basic, and it just shows a VFR route. And that route was taken from the information in from the CFS, the terminal procedures chart for that VFR route. But it's nice to have it overlaid on the map. Another example of custom content is just importing your own or charts that you have access to, whether that's something online, like this is a BC topographic chart that is available online. You can import that right into ForeFlight, and it's georeferenced already, and it shows, you can overlay that on the map, or you can select it as a map essentially. In-flight weather in Canada. Let's take a look at what our options are. ForeFlight supports the GDL 50, 51, 52, so a couple of different receivers there. And these are great for Canada because they provide XM weather. As most people know, ADS-B weather is not available in Canada on a broad scale. So there's some ADS-B installations in the kind of Toronto area, which is an awesome project that's been going on there, and kudos to those guys for their project. But in a lot of Canada, there's no ground-based ADS-B towers that broadcast weather. This is available in the US, but not in Canada. So the best option for weather in Canada is an XM receiver like the GDL 51 or 52, and it provides access to XM weather, which then you can have reliable weather while you're flying in ForeFlight. Just an example of the Sirius XM weather subscriptions for Canada. And the SiriusXM has a pilot for ForeFlight subscription that's $39.99 per month. So you can learn more about that too at foreflight.com/connect/SiriusXM. Okay, so we're just about at our time here, and we're going to jump into some Q&A. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Have a great summer, fly safe, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send an email to team@foreflight.com. We're all pilots on the team here, and we're happy to help. So send in those emails, and if we don't get to all of the questions today, please send an email to team@foreflight, and we'll get back to you on that.
All right. Yeah, as always said, thanks so much, everyone, just for joining today. It was great to kind of go through a VFR flight in Canada. We got lots of great questions. I think that we got to answer most of them. But yeah, as I was just saying, if anybody has more questions, or if your question didn't get answered, because we did get quite a few today, please send an email to team@ForeFlight, and we can really take time to address that question and get a full answer back. Send screenshots showing how to do something or anything like that. We're all pilots on the team. We're really happy to dig into any questions that you might have for us. So do that. But that being said, I'm going to jump into some live Q&A here. I'm just kind of looking through all the questions and seeing what's just coming in now. I wanted to start with, we got a number of questions on using the Sentry ADS-B receiver in Canada and ADS-B in Canada, and even a cool link to the Nav Canada's space-based ADS-B website that they have, talking about kind of future of maybe a future for a space-based ADS-B system in Canada. So I just want to talk about that first. To start, the Sentry, which someone asked about, is an ADS-B receiver. So any type of ADS-B receiver, whether it's a Sentry or a Stratus or it's a Garmin ADS-B receiver, it will work in Canada, but not the functions of receiving ADS-B from ground-based towers, because there are no ground-based ADS-B towers in Canada, at least none that are set up by Nav Canada that broadcast weather and traffic like there are in the US. So the US has a whole network of ground-based ADS-B towers that are constantly transmitting traffic information and weather information. So if you fly in the US and you have an ADS-B receiver, you can automatically have access to that information that's being broadcast by those ground-based towers. But in Canada, that doesn't exist. So we don't have that ability. So if you fly in Canada with an ADS-B receiver, there's just that information isn't there to pick up. What you can pick up is potentially a direct broadcast traffic information. So aircraft like airline aircraft or aircraft that are equipped with a transponder that broadcast their direct traffic information, an ADS-B receiver like a Sentry can pick that up in Canada, and you'll be able to receive that because there's no, in that scenario, there's no requirement for a ground-based tower. So you'll pick up some traffic information in Canada. You also get, of course, all the other features that may come with an ADS-B receiver, like a Sentry, which is, you know, the internal GPS and the AHRS, the attitude heading reference system, and all that kind of stuff. But going back to ADS-B, I did kind of mention it and just wanted to say again, because I think it's such a cool project, is this project, which is the Canada Flight Information Broadcast Association, which are a group in the Toronto area that have set up some of their own ADS-B towers that broadcast the weather and some traffic. I think just weather, I believe. So you can look up their website, CIFIB, Canada In-Flight Information Broadcasting Association. So I think if you just Google ADS-B Toronto, it'll come up. So there is that. If you're flying a lot in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area, it's a cool project, and you can get some ADS-B weather that way. But if not, the best and kind of only reliable source of weather in Canada, if you're flying all across Canada, would be an XM receiver like a Garmin GDL 51 or 52, which is both XM and ADS-B if you're maybe flying as well in the US. So that is that. Let's just go through and look through some of these other questions. We had some questions on how do we see these new VFR waypoints in Canada. So of course, you want to make sure that you have the latest version of ForeFlight downloaded. So go to the App Store and get the latest update 15.5, which makes those available. Make sure you have all your downloads current, and that you have the aeronautical map selected on the maps page, because that's where they live. And if you zoom in on areas, you should see those automatically start to show up for you. And if they don't, or if you have any more questions on that, just definitely send us an email and we can help you get those set up. All right, what other questions do we have here? I'm just going to see if there's any more that have just come in very recently. Yeah, I think just to add, there's about ADS-B close to the border in Canada. When I used to do a little bit more flying in the Toronto area, I had tested that a little bit, and it can be difficult to get ADS-B weather in the Toronto area. I'm sure if you're flying really close to the US border, you might be able to pick up a little bit from US-based towers. So that's just another little add-on to the ADS-B in Canada. Again, oh yeah, I mentioned someone had sent in the space-based ADS-B, and I was taking a look at that, the website. Canada, or NAV Canada, has a website talking about a space-based ADS-B system, which is interesting and be good for a large area like Canada. They don't talk about weather though. It's that I've seen so far. So it sounds like it may just be a way to get traffic information, which is great for increased safety for traffic. But it doesn't sound like they're going to be broadcasting weather via that system, and I'm not sure the time frame for when that may be available at all. All right, let's see if we have any more questions here that we can go over. Trying to think some that we've got a few of, and I'm going to do, I think, one last one here. Okay, we had a few questions about adding the waypoint specific altitudes, and that may be a good one just to kind of address on a one-on-one basis. So, but I'll try to do a bit of a broad answer on some of those. So I talked about it at the start, where there's the option to add a specific altitude and associate that with a waypoint. So for example, if you wanted to do a step climb, you could say, I want to take off from this airport and I want to fly at 2,000 feet from this waypoint, and then later climb up to 8,500 feet. So first of all, I think we had one of the questions was, how do I set that? And the best way to do that is to have the maps page open in ForeFlight, and if you tap on one of the waypoints in your route, you get a little pop-up. And in that pop-up, there's an option at the bottom of the list that says set altitude, speed, time. So you want to tap on that, and you can select start at or cross at for the altitude. So you'd say cross at, and then you'd enter the altitude that you want to cross that waypoint at. So you would select 2,000 feet, and later on in the route, if you had a higher one, you'd select 8,500 feet for that. We also had a couple of questions in terms of how does that impact fuel calculations. And on the maps page, ForeFlight is still going to use your aircraft performance profile to calculate fuel. So even if you have a step climb with different altitudes, ForeFlight's still going to look at your aircraft performance profile, which is based on more of a standard climb, cruise, and descent profile. It's still going to be incredibly accurate, especially if you're flying a piston aircraft. There's not a significant difference like there is with a jet or a turboprop in terms of fuel burn. For if you were going to stay for the first number of miles at 2,000 feet and then climb up to 8,500 feet versus just kind of a consistent climb, it's going to be pretty close, pretty similar in like a piston aircraft, like a 172. So that being said, the fuel calculations will be based on your aircraft profile. They're not going to be based on the step climb that you set, but it's a good way that you can kind of still enter those, and you can see them reflected in the profile view. So that's kind of a quick overview of the altitude specific waypoints that you can create. Again, it's nice to address these if you have a specific scenario or question. So if you do have that, if you're planning a route and you're not sure about how to enter a step climb, or you have a scenario that you want to create, let us know. And I can even try to personally get back to you as well. But if not, there's a lot of other great people that can get back to you with kind of an answer to how to best create that scenario that you want to for planning your route. All right, so we don't want to go over our time too much here. I think we're just past an hour. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate it. As I said, just have a great summer and fly safe, and hopefully we'll see you out there.